In the beginning, there was nothing. And then in 1962, some students at MIT decided to make a neat little computer program called Space War. This computer program would later become what is now generally considered to be the first video game. But that isn't where our story starts. Jump ahead 15 years to 1977. By now, arcade games and home consoles were the dominant methods of play, although something new had emerged. 1977 was the introduction of the home computer. The public now had access to a computer that you could use in the comfort and convenience of your own home. So naturally, people did what anyone would do in this situation: play video games. Except there was one problem. Actually, quite a few, but the biggest problem was that there weren't any video games to play on your computer. Video games were seen as a thing for arcades and consoles. So naturally, people did what anyone would do in this situation: make video games. A wave of nerdy teenagers obsessing over this new and wonderful technology became the first indie devs. In 1981, though, the Sinclair ZX81 would be released in Britain. This computer was designed to be a good computer at an affordable price point, which made it incredibly popular. Notably, at this point, consoles were mostly just a thing in America and Japan, meaning that PC gaming really didn't have much competition for the British youth. This, of course, spawned a new wave of bedroom coders. So great, if you knew your way around a computer, you could make a text adventure or rip off your favorite arcade game. But then what? There was no Steam in 1980, so it wasn't all that easy to share your work or see what other people made. If you wanted to sell your games, which due to competition against the big boys like Atari, was heavily discouraged, you would have to sell them via mail order, or if you were lucky, a local store might stock your games. If you did sell your game, due to storage constraints, you might have to sell your game on multiple discs, usually having different sets of levels on each. So I guess DLC has been a thing since the very beginning. In 1983, the video game crash happened. While big companies like Atari and Nintendo were hit hard, most gamers weren't really affected. Computers were a more efficient, powerful, and economic way of playing video games, which further popularized PC games. Through the 90s and early 2000s, video game publishers began to enter the scene. But publishers being publishers and PC games still being mostly reserved to computer nerds in their rooms, it was hard to get your indie game in front of a wide audience. Enter shareware. Developers would ship part of their game as a free demo and then encourage people to pirate said demo to their heart's content. At the time, this was not frowned upon at all. The games were being offered for free, and developers wanted them to be shared around as much as possible because this was the best way to market your game. So if people liked their officially endorsed pirated version, they could buy the full game for more levels or new content. And of course, shareware became a big thing, because trading video games on floppy disks like their Pokemon cards is bound to be popular. Around this time, tools like Adobe Flash and sites like Newgrounds also started popping up. This caused a flourishing community of playing little indie games online. However, things took a massive shift in the 21st century. In 2003, Valve released this funny little platform called Steam. At first, it was kinda crappy, and it was mainly designed for distributing and updating Valve's games, as well as supporting the modding community that came with them. But in 2005, Valve allowed for other developers to put their games on Steam. The first third-party game on Steam was Ragdoll Kung Fu. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Moving on. Other services such as Xbox Live Arcade started popping up, which would allow indie developers to get their games onto big consoles. Now with a new focus on indie games, tools that allowed individuals to make games on their own, like Unity and other game engines, started being released to the public. This early 2000s to 2010s era is considered by some as the golden age of indie games, with notable releases such as Braid, Super Meat Boy, Fez, Cave Story, and others. In 2009, Minecraft was released. And things would keep getting better for the independent game dev, as sites like Humble Bundle and itch.io were released. But in 2015, the indie-pocalypse happened, according to some anyway. The idea of an indie-pocalypse was that at this point, with how easy it was to make and publish games, the market would become oversaturated, and as a result, indie games would essentially die. Now, the market is heavily oversaturated, meaning that you really have to market your game well if you want it to be seen by anyone. But despite that, indie games are still going strong. And around this time, ironically, is what I would consider to be an indie renaissance, or even a second golden age. Between 2015 and 2018, some indie games released that you may or may not have heard of. To name a few: Undertale, Stardew Valley, Hollow Knight, Celeste, Untitled Goose Game, Cuphead, Hades, Dead Cells, Enter the Gungeon, Firewatch, Superhot VR, Inside, and a lot more. Some say that we're still in the indie-pocalypse, but it looks like most people don't believe there really ever was one anymore. Which leads us to today, almost 50 years later. From the simple programs written by teenagers in their spare time to a global phenomenon, it makes you wonder, where will indie games go next?